This very tiny photograph is probably from 1933, and that's the cottage down the hill that my dad built up from an old chicken shack. And as you can see, there was absolutely nothing else in this area at all. My father kept adding to it and adding rooms and finessing it and so forth. Before he went off into civil service during World War II, he was walking around the area near the chicken shack and looked down at this site and suddenly was struck that this would be the perfect place for him to build his dream house. So his journals and sketchbooks during the time he was away in Utah and then in California are filled with doodles and plans for the house that he hoped to build here after the war, which is what he did. This is a view from the west looking east when there were no other houses around. And this is a view looking before the living room was built, but the back wall showing how the rock and the wall originally joined. Well, this is the living room in an earlier stage, and you can see the rock to the side. The back windows without the bookshelves. So this is the living room with a good view of the rock before the first fireplace was built, which is now a wood stove. The original stove was a fireplace with a copper hood and copper chimney, which filled the area that was excavated in the rock that can be seen now. It was a very beautiful fireplace, but it was very inefficient as a stove. So eventually it was replaced. This current one is several wood stoves later. We're looking at the east wall, which is a natural sandstone rock, and provided the inspiration for the house to be built here. So the house is deliberately saddled between this outcrop and the ridge to the west. And this is the entrance stairway in progress before the steps were built from the living room up into the kitchen. And the view looking out the kitchen window toward Pikes Peak when the trees on the hill in front of the peak were not very high, and now they've grown up to where the view of the peak is much more obscured. It has glass on three sides, which may or may not have been that common in the late 40s. I'm not sure. But this is one of the illustrations. This and the rock wall downstairs illustrate some of the precepts that Archie had in mind when he built this place. He wrote down that what he wanted to guide him were three precepts, which were: keep it simple, don't offend the landscape, and make it as close to living out of doors as possible. I like to say that these windows are my widescreen TV. It's kind of like a treehouse up here. When my parents first moved into this house, and then when my brother and I were very small, they had their studios in the house, and the furthest west room was my dad's painting studio. This room was constructed with the big picture window, which provided north light, and now it's my enameling studio, so it's come full circle. This room was originally my parents' bedroom, and then was my brother's bedroom when we were growing up. There's a mural here that is it reflects some of the images we can see outside the windows, particularly one dominant rock formation. But a lot of the images, especially the animals, are strikingly similar to the ones in the mural in the downstairs lounge at the Fine Arts Center, which my father did in 1936. And in fact, the technique here is similar to that too. It's dry pigments rubbed onto a background with just a little bit of inking. So some of the animals are exactly the same ones as the ones from the Fine Arts Center. This was my brother's and my bedroom when we were toddlers, before we got our own room. It's now being used as a guest room and overflow library. But the painting, the mural on the wall here, images from children's books, was painted when my brother and I were toddlers. But it's taken from the mural that my dad painted in 1954 at Kenyon Elementary School. But it follows a character from a children's book of the time, a little Indian boy named Kiko, on his dreams as he participates in a lot of different children's adventures. My dad took a course in wood carving from Mary Chenoweth, and his project during that course was our front door, which is still my front door. I love living on the edge of the Garden of the Gods, and I love the rocks. I love having the rock in the house, and I think it's a cool, unusual, funky, odd house, which happens to have all this history with it as well.